We'd only been in the house for about 2 weeks. When he showed up, my husband and I had just finished unpacking the last of our boxes. And I was finally settling into a routine. Waking up early to prep lesson plans, drinking coffee on the porch, while the morning sun hit the tops of the neighbors' palm trees. The neighborhood was calm in a way that made you realize how tense you'd been. We took walks in the evening exploring the streets lined with jacarandas and well-tended yards. Neighbors waved, we smiled back. It was all so different from the apartment we'd been in before. No sirens, no stomping upstairs neighbors, no constant city buzz, just quiet. I loved it. It was a Tuesday late afternoon. I remember because I had a staff meeting that ran long, and I got home just before sunset. I kicked my shoes off, tossed my bag onto the bench in the entryway, and barely made it to the kitchen when the doorbell rang. My husband was still at work, so I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. A man stood there, mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. He looked normal, average build, neatly trimmed facial hair, no wild look in his eyes. He smiled politely and asked, "Is Casey home?" It took me a second to process. I definitely wasn't expecting that. "I'm sorry, there's no Casey here, we just moved in." He lost his smile for a split second. "All right, sorry to bother you." He walked away with his hands in his pockets, slow, but no sign of second thoughts. I watched him go, thinking maybe he had the wrong address that Friday freed. He came back. I recognized him right away. "I'm looking for Casey," he said again. His voice was firmer this time. "She's expecting me." I gave him a confused look. "We just moved in about 2 weeks ago. I don't know anyone named Casey." His expression didn't change, but he angled his head toward the house, like he was trying to hear something this strange. "I just spoke to her." I squinted at him. "When not long ago," he said, vague as ever. He gave a small shrug, like it wasn't a big deal. "Sorry for the confusion." He walked off again, slower this time, like he was making a point that night. I brought it up with my husband. We sat on the couch while a rerun of some cooking show played in the background. He frowned, arms crossed. "If he shows up again, I'll talk to him." 3 days later, he did come back. This time my husband answered the door. He didn't raise his voice, but his posture was stiff. "I don't know who Casey is, but you need to stop coming around here." The man stood silently, no apology. This time no smile, just a blank stare, eyes fixed on my husband's face, like he was memorizing it right. He finally said, then he turned and walked away. We figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. About a week later, I noticed a car parked across the street, same time every night. Right around 9, lights off, engine off. Just a figure in the driver's seat. The first night I thought it was nothing, someone waiting to pick someone up, happens all the time. But the next night it was there again and again. The next, always the same car, dark sedan, windows tinted, no movement. One night, I stood at the upstairs window for 20 minutes just watching it. The figure never moved, didn't smoke, didn't check their phone, just sat there. I mentioned it to my husband, who said he hadn't noticed, but I could tell. He started keeping an eye out after that. A few days later, I went outside to water the plants around sunset. As I passed the side yard, the motion light flicked on. There was nothing there, no wind, no raccoons, just the sharp click of the bulb warming up and casting shadows across the fence. Then another night we found the back gate wide open. My husband swore he'd locked it earlier that day. We checked the fence line, no obvious damage, no sign someone had forced their way in, just an open gate. And that same eerie stillness. I couldn't relax anymore. I stopped sitting on the porch. I kept the curtains drawn all day. I started sleeping with the bedroom door locked, even though my husband was home. I made a non-emergency report online. It took a few days to get a response. The officer on the phone was polite, but clearly not concerned. He said it was probably a misunderstanding, maybe a delivery driver. Maybe someone looking for a friend who used to live there. Will send someone by now. Then he added it didn't help. Then one Thursday night, I was home alone grading papers at the dining room table. My husband was working late covering for someone at the hospital. I had my laptop open, half a sandwich on the plate beside me. And I was halfway through a student essay on Romeo and Juliet, when the doorbell rang. It was just after 9:30. I stood up slow and careful. The house was quiet. The hallway to the front door was dark. I turned on the porch light before stepping closer. I waited a beat, then opened the door. Just a crack, no one was there. I stepped onto the porch just far enough to look around. That's when I saw it, mud tracked across the welcome mat, thin streaks of it, and footprints, just one set. They didn't go back down the path. They veered off toward the side yard. I shut the door and locked it, every deadbolt, every chain. Then I called my husband, whispering into the phone. As I locked myself in the downstairs bathroom, he stayed on the line with me, telling me to breathe, to stay quiet, and to call the police. I did. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. They walked the yard, checked the fence line, looked around the porch, no sign of anyone. But one officer stayed behind and asked me what the man looked like. I described him as best I could. He nodded slowly. I think I know who that is. Used to live here, got evicted after some issues. What kind of issues? I asked. He hesitated. Nothing I can say officially, but if he shows up again, don't open the door. Just call us. When my husband got home, we searched the entire house together, room by room, nothing missing, no broken windows. But something felt off. It felt like whoever had been here wasn't trying to get in, they just wanted us to know. They were still around later that week. I pulled out our home purchase paperwork and combed through it. Nowhere in the documents was the name Casey. Just the seller, but that name had burned itself into my mind. We installed security cameras after that, adjusted our routines. We didn't answer the door for anyone we didn't recognize. We started letting calls go to voicemail. We avoided walking the dog after dark, and for a long while nothing happened. The car stopped showing up, the lights outside stayed off. The house felt like ours again. Then one morning, I opened the front door to grab a package and froze there. There was no box, just a single piece of paper taped to the door. Written in thick red marker, all caps, tell Casey I'll find her, I always do. I never met Casey, but somehow I became her shadow. I moved into the house in July 2020. Right in the thick of lockdown. Everything was weird. Then streets were empty, the world felt like it was on pause, and even though we were all isolated, I felt like I needed to be even more alone. I just ended a long-term relationship that should have ended months earlier. Work had gone fully remote, and the lease on my apartment was up. Eugene had this laid-back, quiet vibe. It was affordable, full of trees and trails. And I figured if I was going to be stuck somewhere rebuilding, I might as well pick a place where I could actually breathe. The house I found was a 1930s craftsman bungalow just outside the University District. It looked charming online and in person. It wasn't bad either. 2 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, tall windows that made every room glow, and a porch that wrapped around the front and one side. The porch looked great in the photos. In reality, it had a few rotting boards and needed a good pressure wash. But I didn't care, it was mine, or at least it was mine to rent, and it was peaceful. I thought I'll stay here for a year, maybe 2, reset everything and get my life back on track. There was just one thing. I didn't like the attic, more specifically the attic door. It was in the hallway ceiling, one of those square panels with a dangling pull string. And from day one it never sat fully shut. It always sagged a little at the edge, like it hadn't been latched all the way. I figured it was warped wood, old houses always come with their quirks, right? But what really stood out was the temperature. I'd walk down the hall, and it would feel like a pocket of air from a different climate zone. The rest of the house would be cool, sometimes chilly at night. But right under that attic hatch, It was warm, uncomfortably warm, not just heat either. It was moist, like someone had just gotten out of a hot shower the first night. I remember walking under it and stopping, because I felt it on my skin like warm breath. I kept the thermostat low, had a ceiling fan running in the bedroom, and cracked windows. Circulation didn't matter. The hallway always had that same humid, still feeling. I told myself it was just poor insulation. That made sense. Maybe the attic trapped heat and moisture. That's what I do when things feel off. I try to make sense of them. But the attic door stayed slightly ajar, not open, just not closed. And I found myself checking it more often than I wanted to admit. I'd look up on the way to the bathroom on my way to bed just to make sure it hadn't moved, that it wasn't wider than the day before. Then little things started happening, things that wouldn't normally bother me, but stacked together they got under my skin. The first time I noticed the cereal box. I always keep it in the cabinet, but I found it sitting on top of the fridge twice. I thought maybe I was distracted, maybe I was just tired, but then I started seeing the fridge door open in the morning. Not wide, just enough that the light inside was on, like someone had opened it. Stared for a second, then forgotten to close it. I live alone, always have. I'm borderline obsessive about small details. So seeing the fridge slightly ajar, that didn't sit right. A few days later I noticed my sneakers by the front door were turned around. Not shifted, not kicked, completely turned around, as if someone had picked them up and placed them back facing the wall. I hadn't even worn them that day. That's when I started taking pictures, just little things, my keys, the shoes, the cereal box, how the blinds were tilted. I'd snap a quick shot before bed so I could compare it in the morning. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I needed to know. A week later, lying in bed around 2:30 in the morning, I was half asleep scrolling through Twitter. Everything was quiet, no wind, no traffic. Then clear as day I heard it, a cough. It was dry, short, like someone clearing their throat, and it came from directly above me. I live in a one-story house. There's nothing above me, just the attic. I sat up, my phone slipped out of my hand and hit the blanket. I didn't move, just sat there staring up at the ceiling. I waited for footsteps, movement, anything, but it stayed quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid there listening for another sound, but nothing came. The next day I called my buddy Josh. I didn't tell him everything, just that I thought someone might be messing with me. He laughed. You probably got a possum up there, man, or an attic goblin. Beat it, peanut butter make peace. I laughed too, but not really. I couldn't let it go. I started looking up stories about people finding squatters in their attics or walls. Turns out it happens more than you think. Some people live in other people's houses for weeks before they're caught. I knew I had to check. So the next afternoon I grabbed a flashlight, a broom handle, and a knife from the kitchen, just in case. I pulled down the ladder and opened the hatch. The heat hit me like a wall, thicker than ever. The smell was worse now, like body odor and garbage. I climbed a few rungs and shined the light around. It was empty, no furniture, just exposed beams, fiberglass insulation, and dust, but the air felt used, like it had been breathed. I didn't go all the way up. I told myself I didn't need to. I'd seen enough that night. I set my phone up on a tripod and aimed it at the attic door. I hit record, left the hallway light on, and tried to sleep. Every creak in the house made me twitch. The next morning I woke up groggy and immediately checked the footage. 6 hours of mostly nothing. I scrubbed through it frame by frame. Then at 3:47 a.m. it happened. The attic door shifted just a little, wobble. Then it opened, slow, controlled, no sound. A bare foot emerged. Then a hand gripping the frame. A thin figure lowered themselves down the ladder. No shoes, pale skin. I couldn't see the face, the hallway light was behind them, but I could see the shape, gone slow. They stepped off screen. I paused the video, just sat there. Then I ran to the kitchen and threw up. I called the police. They arrived fast, 2 officers. I showed them the footage. One of them raised his eyebrows. The other asked if I'd searched the attic. They went up with flashlights and gloves 10 minutes later. One called the other over. They found a rolled-up foam mattress, an empty peanut butter jar, 2 water bottles, and a spiral notebook. The notebook was filled with drawings. All of me in pencil, rough sketches. All from odd angles, through windows, from above, from behind the couch. One showed me eating at the dining table, another was me watching TV. Another was me sleeping. The cops said they'd take prints, file a report, maybe pull security footage from nearby houses. But they didn't seem hopeful, said. The guy was probably long gone. I packed a bag and left that same day, crashed at Josh's place for a week, before hiring movers to get the rest of my stuff. Now I only rent top-floor apartments. I don't even look at listings with attics or basements, too much risk. I used to think I was a rational guy, but there's nothing rational about a stranger watching you sleep from your own ceiling. I bought the house with the kind of excitement you can only have when you think you finally cracked the code. It was supposed to be my first real flip, something I'd live in for a while, fix up slowly, and eventually sell at a decent profit, a transitional space. That's what I called it, not forever, just something between where I was and where I wanted to be. It looked perfect from the outside. Mid-century charm, red brick with ivy climbing up one side, a big oak tree in the front yard that dropped leaves like confetti every time the wind picked up inside. It was older, creaky in places, but nothing I hadn't dealt with before. I've walked through houses with floors that buckled like waves, and ceilings that sagged like stretched fabric. This one just character, hardwood floors, original trim, a fireplace that worked, and a sunroom that glowed in the afternoons. I moved in the first week of October, crisp mornings, golden light sweater weather, the kind of autumn you want to bottle. I spent the first few days painting the kitchen cabinets and mapping out where I'd start renovations once I got my next commission check. It wasn't until week 2 that I noticed the hatch. It was in the hallway closet under a loose board that shifted slightly every time I stepped into the space. I'd been storing cleaning supplies in there, and kept feeling this weird uneven tilt under my feet. One day I pulled everything out, rolled up my sleeves, and lifted the board. Underneath was a square of wood painted the same color as the floor, no hinges, no handle. It was flush with the rest of the boards, but not nailed, held down. Someone had gone through the trouble of making it disappear that night. I grabbed a crowbar from the garage and pried it open. It made a sound I'll never forget, like the house exhaled. Dust flew up into my face, thick and powdery. I pointed my flashlight into the dark and saw steps, not stairs, steps, narrow, uneven boards leading down into a crawl space. I should have waited until daylight, but curiosity has always been my worst habit. I stepped down, the air shifted. It was cooler but not cold, smelled like mildew and something waxy. The space wasn't what I expected. It was bigger than it should have been, deeper. I could stand up without hunching over. The floor was dirt mostly, but someone had laid down old boards across the center, forming a kind of platform, and on it dozens of candle stubs, short, burned down, melted into the wood. Arranged in a near-perfect circle at the center was a pile of dried flower petals. Scattered around them were clippings of hair, some long, some short. And just beyond that, barely visible under a layer of dust, was a Polaroid photo. I bent down and picked it up, brushed it off. It was the living room, the same living room I'd just been sitting in. The photo looked old, faded, but the furniture layout was identical to how I had it arranged. I know I didn't copy anything from the previous owner. I hadn't even seen the listing photos until after I moved in. There was someone standing in the center of the frame, wearing a mask, not a Halloween mask or something store-bought. This looked homemade, like papier-mâché over burlap, with hollow black eye and no mouth, just blank. I backed up, left the crawl space open, and went upstairs. I sat on the couch and stared at the photo for a long time. Eventually, I slid it into a drawer in the kitchen and tried to convince myself it was just some weird leftover from a previous owner. The next day, I noticed my dog Bentley was acting off. He's a rescue, not super reactive, but he has good instincts. He sniffed the closet door, then whined, then wouldn't go near it again. I called his name, tried to coax him over with a treat, but he just backed away and went to lie on the far end of the couch. That's when I started to feel like maybe something really was off. Over the next few days, I caught a faint smell coming from the closet. It reminded me of birthday candles after they've been blown out, mixed with wet leaves paint, but consistent. I thought maybe I'd stirred up mold or something, but when I checked again, there was nothing visibly growing. The crawl space looked exactly the same. I told myself to let it go. It's just an old house. Old houses have smells. But every night I thought about that photo. A week later, I was watching TV in the sunroom. Bentley was asleep next to me. I got up to get water from the kitchen, and when I came back, the photo was on the counter, the one from the crawl space. I hadn't taken it out. No one else had keys. I didn't touch it. I grabbed Bentley, went to my room, and locked the door. The next day, I called a contractor friend of mine, told him I needed someone to look at a weird space under the house. He came over that afternoon. I walked him through what I'd found. He didn't say much, just nodded, crouched down, and climbed into the crawl space with a big utility flashlight. A few minutes passed, then a few more. I called down to him, no answer. I was just about to grab the flashlight from the garage when I heard his voice, "You should come look at this." I stepped down carefully. Keith was standing near the far wall, staring at the wood beams. There were scratch marks, deep ones, not random, repeated parallel lines etched into the support beams, some of them forming crude shapes, circles, X's, a few symbols I didn't recognize. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept every light in the house on. Bentley wouldn't leave my side. At one point around 2 a.m., I heard a soft creak like the floorboard in the hallway outside my door. I didn't check, I just sat there wide awake, gripping the flashlight. I sealed the crawl space the next morning, cut new boards, nailed them, and painted over. It moved a heavy dresser on top. And I listed the house. I didn't tell the agent about what I found. I know that's probably wrong, but I needed to be done with it. A few weeks later, I was showing a completely different property on the other side of town. Bright, modern, open floor plan, zero history, just drywall and engineered floors, as sterile as it gets. As I was locking up, my phone buzzed. Security alert from the smart cameras. I had forgotten. I never deactivated at the old house. Motion detected. I got into my car and opened my laptop. I watched, heart pounding, as the live feed struggled to load. The footage was jumpy, glitchy, but I saw it clear as day. A shadow, not from outside, from within. The camera caught a figure, not a person, not exactly, just the faint outline of something moving towards the crawl space, and then just before the feed cut to black, it disappeared. I slammed my laptop shut, too freaked out to even think about hitting record. I didn't go back, not to check, not to confirm, not even for closure. Some houses don't want to be flipped. I bought the house after a promotion. My first real one, the kind that comes with its own office, a title change, and a paid bump big enough to finally stop sharing walls with strangers. The house was a reward to myself, a gorgeous little historic home in one of Richmond's older neighborhoods, tucked between two sycamore Lynn streets with brick sidewalks and front porches that had seen generations. I'd been working toward this for years, long hours, endless cases, late nights prepping depositions and trial briefs. It finally paid off. And this house felt like a physical marker of everything I'd accomplished. I was single, financially stable, and finally living somewhere I could call my own without feeling like I was squatting in someone else's idea of a home. I moved in mid-October. The leaves were turning, the air had the dry, smoky bite to it, and for once, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. It was quiet, mostly older folks. And a few families, the kind of place where everyone waves when they walk their dog, and says things like "let me know if you need anything." The day after I moved in, I was unpacking plates in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. It was a woman, maybe early 60s, holding a Tupperware of cookies. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said brightly. "I'm Claire. I live just there," she added, pointing to the yellow house next door. She seemed sweet, chipper, and that way older women sometimes are when they've lived in the same house for decades. We made small talk for a few minutes, and I thanked her for the cookies. She lingered a bit, looking around like she was taking inventory. But there was something about her that threw me a comment she made as she looked around my living room. "You kept the rug. I see, that's nice, it suits the room." I hadn't kept the rug, it came with the staging. I had my own, but the staging rug and mine were similar, maybe that's all it was. Except she also mentioned the window treatments. "Those green curtains upstairs do such a good job blocking the light. I always thought they were underrated." I hadn't told her which bedroom I was using, and I hadn't opened those curtains since I moved in. I just assumed she must have been friends with the last owner. Maybe she helped with the sale, or was just unusually observant. Nothing to be weird about. A week went by, then another. I was still settling and hanging art, finding new routines, figuring out the best takeout nearby. I'd work long hours, come home late, eat leftovers on the couch with something mindless on TV. I'd see Claire often. She was always in her window, morning, night. It didn't seem to matter. Sometimes she'd wave, sometimes she wouldn't. One time I waved first, and she didn't respond, just stared. Then things got a little weirder. I got a piece of mail addressed to me, but the name was misspelled, not in a random way, but in a way that only made sense if someone was going off pronunciation instead of seeing it written almost like she'd heard it, but never read it. The envelope wasn't handwritten, just typed out on some cheap paper. No return address inside, was a real estate flyer, nothing else. Another time, I was coming home from work and found a folded piece of paper tucked into my mailbox. No envelope, no return address, just a single line: "You look better than the last girl." No signature. It creeped me out. I tried to tell myself it was some kind of prank or old neighborhood gossip, but I felt like someone was watching from a distance. Claire never said anything inappropriate, never came onto my property, never crossed a line I could point to, but the energy was wrong. It was in the way she looked at me, too long, too still, like she was always waiting for something. Once I caught her standing at her window at 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, walked to the kitchen for water, and just happened to look through the blinds. There she was, lights off, just her pale silhouette framed in the glass. I mentioned it in passing to a colleague over lunch. She raised an eyebrow and told me to get a camera system just in case. I bought one that night. Then I called a friend from law school who'd gone into cybersecurity, told him everything, asked him, half joking, half not, to sweep the place. He came by a few days later with a handheld detector. We checked the living room, kitchen, bathroom, and then the bedroom. Got something, he said. He pointed the device at the air vent above my bed. Inside was a tiny camera. I couldn't even see it until he shined a flashlight in. It was no bigger than a screw head, completely silent, wired to nothing obvious. I reported it immediately. The police came, took statements, filed a report. I gave them everything: the note, the footage from my cameras, which at that point only showed Claire standing at her window, always at the window. They got a warrant. When they searched her house, they found dozens of printed photos, all of me labeled dated. Me watering the plants, me watching TV, me eating dinner, me sleeping. There was a list too, titled "What She Does," and when it had times notes: 7:15 a.m. shower, 9:30 p.m. sits on left side of couch, Tuesday takes trash out. The police said the previous owners had filed a complaint too, but nothing stuck apparently. It had been dismissed, no hard proof. Claire didn't deny anything. But she didn't explain it either, just said she liked to keep track of the neighborhood, that she had a good memory for details, that she never meant harm. No charges were filed. There wasn't enough, nothing that met the threshold hold. I installed blackout curtains, changed the locks, moved the bed to the opposite wall. Claire never spoke to me again. But every night I'd see her face in the window, not moving, not even blinking. Just watching. It wasn't the house that felt unsafe.